Hey Band Network Remote
Welcome to
Teaching
Hey Band Network.
Series.
Today we are joined by Dr. Cory Meals, University of Houston, and the creator of virtualmusicconference.org, and Joni Perez, the director of bands at the Woodlands High School and part of a new interview series called Inside the Director's Office. The Hey Band Network wanted to chat with these two on their motivation and starting new projects during our school closures. And how are they working to help educators now that we have a little extra time and desire to stay connected? So let's get started. How did Inside the Director's Office get started?
A stroke of genius on the part of Joni to kind of go, hey, these kids are missing out on conversations and information, and we want to try and at least augment that. And I'm really glad that she reached out to me to do that. And I think she's kind of emceed them with a fair amount of aplomb and a lot of wisdom, because she's had many of our student teachers from U of H, and I know other places too.
Yeah, that was one of those first group of kids that kind of popped into my head, other than my own seniors, were the college seniors, And I was in bed one night, like right after everything got shut down. I was like, hey, I think I want to try to do this. And so I don't know what made me think of Cory. I mean, I just know he's very on top of, being things from an organizational standpoint, and like would be able to help me execute the idea. And so I called him up and he was all over it. Of course, he has a vested interest because of his kids at U of H. And we were both kind of dealing with a lot of our own things at the time, trying to figure out how to maneuver, through figuring out how we want to deal with the situation. And so there were certain things that I leaned on him for, and we both kind of just collaborated and made it work. So it was pretty cool. So we tried to think of things that kind of general, broad concepts that don't necessarily get covered a lot in college. Now, there's a lot of things that are hands-on that they're going to miss out on, obviously, in the classroom. But there's not a very great way to steer them through that realistically in this setting. And so we thought of, other topics that would be meaningful to them, getting them in, getting started in the profession, and try to direct some advice towards specific areas that they're going to need to be thinking about, in terms of being a new teacher, and how to apply for jobs, and what to do when you're setting up your resume, and things to do as an assistant director, and just entering the field, try to better equip them for that. And so that's kind of the springboard for most of those. And then we also tried ride along, which I'm interested in trying another one, Cory, if you are.
Yeah, I'm definitely, there's definitely ways we could streamline and improve it too. So, but yeah, I mean, and that was an interesting just kind of thing. I spitballed to Joni one day. She's like, okay, let's try it, where we take a recording of a band kind of in the middle of their season, so to speak. So like a pre-OIL sort of thing. And we sit down and listen to sections of it with the score, with the students. And then Joni and I, in this case, or whoever the teachers are in the room, kind of talk about how do we interpret what's going on, and how do we prioritize what our ensemble is going to do next based on what we hear in the performance. Kind of that thing that band directors naturally develop, but it's a little bit of a rough start a lot of times for younger students when they come out of undergraduate, because there's not a lot of requirement for that level of thinking in their undergraduate experience. There's, can you start and stop a band? Can you hear the melody and those sorts of things? But that next level is kind of what they experience in student teaching, and what they really experience in the first year of teaching. And so we kind of wanted to try and bridge that gap a little bit. And I think it was successful. I think there's definitely some things to leaven it a little bit more and make it more impactful for the students. But like Joni gave some great feedback for the students about how to kind of think about spinning out the things you hear into what shows up in the classroom. And I think they got a lot out of it. Honestly, that's really what these do in a lot of ways, is they replicate those conversations that the student teachers have with their cooperating teacher in the office between classes, or after school waiting for a booster meeting, or take your pick of these kind of down moments where, in my experience, and I'm sure Joni's experience and maybe yours experience too, Chad, that's where you gain so much of the bulk of what ends up being your worldview for being a teacher. You know, we can teach you a lot of stuff in the university, and we do a good job of it at Houston, and there's a lot of other universities in Texas that do the same. But this kind of fusion of the formal with that informal conversation is where the strength of the training that they get in the classroom, but also the strength of the experience of being a student teacher, I think really comes through. And I think Joni's done a masterful job of kind of creating spaces for that to exist in a different sort of setting, but still exist.
Yeah, I just tried to think of, you know, the kind of conversations that I would have with my past student teachers, where they exactly like we would be in the office and after a lesson, you know, I would say, okay, do you have any questions? And, you know, they would ask, at that point, they would ask specifically about some of the things in the actual rehearsal, but that would always inevitably spin out into, you know, other concepts and ideas and kind of just facets of the profession that you have to learn how to navigate through. And so many intimate details, you know, that they can get in those conversations that they don't necessarily get at the collegiate level. And so that was kind of the inspiration for a lot of these sessions, so we could have some really candid conversations about, I try to talk to all those kids like they were my student teachers. You know, I've mentioned this to Cory a few times. You know, he's so much more well-spoken than I am. I'm a little bit more rough and blunt, and so they experienced that, and that's how I would have talked to them in the office. You know, because I feel like it needs to be a really when you're talking about how to get in and out of those moments as a band director, it needs to be candid. It needs to be super honest and very direct and sometimes very pointed, you know. And so I try to be honest and candid with them as much as I could and try to have a good time with them and joke around and things like that. So they were getting the real version of me.
I think one of the cool things that Joni was able to do, and we were able to do together, was bring in other people besides us to work with the students. Like we brought in Joel Wren, who's in Klein as the fine arts director. We have Robert Sladen and
Kyle Whitty, who's my assistant, and Jenna
Mm-hmm.
Yee. We did a segment on how to be a great assistant band director.
Mm-hmm.
So I brought
And like
them
all
in.
those people, I think two things. One, they get more insight. The students get more insight with kind of, it's the same thing as bringing in a clinician. They're going to say the same things you say, but with a different voice, so they matter more. But also their backgrounds are unique to them. And so that might stick with one or two students. And I think the third kind of bigger overarching thing that I really appreciate about this is it shows them that we are a connected profession. Like that there's no 6 degrees of separation in music. It's really like 3, and it's like 3 degrees of Travis Cross most of the time. But the thing that I think some of them don't think about is, oh well, Jenna Yee, she's, you know, this person I see on social media, and they have that podcast, and she's inaccessible. She's like, and it's like, no, she's a band director. She, you know, has to tell kids to sit down and blow in the small end, and, you know, all these things. And it humanizes, but it also opens them up to being like, I could go approach these people and ask them questions, and gives them a lot better scaffold to navigate their first couple of years with that sort of network in front of them.
Right. It's like for that session, for instance, you know, it was actually suggested by my current student teacher, because I asked her for some ideas. You know, hey, we're going to start this student teacher thing. Do you have any ideas? And that was one of her ideas, to do one on being an assistant band director. And so I thought, well, you know, let's have somebody from the high school level. Let's have somebody from the junior high level. I will shout this from the mountaintops to anybody who asks me. I have the best assistant on the entire planet. So I asked Kyle Whitty to be the high school representative, and for Jenna to be a middle school representative, who is like, you know, she'll tell you she's a lifelong assistant band director, that like she sees that as her purpose, and, you know, that's what she wants to do. And so and Kyle has been my assistant going on 6 years now. And so these are two people that like have lived in that role and do it beautifully. And all of these student teachers are going to be going directly into an assistant role. And so the idea was to give them some real tools and guidance and advice from their perspectives. And Cory and I didn't talk very much. It was mostly coming from them, and kind of, you know, we put together kind of an outline of things to address, but it was really good for them to get to hear from two people that are going to be in the roles that they're about to go into, and give them some real world, you know, perspective and advice. And as Cory mentioned, allowing the students to actually, interact with them. And so on all these sessions, we will do some Q&As where they can either vocally ask questions or they'll type them into the little chat session, and we'll take a few minutes and take questions and answer them. So I think it's been really good to make it personal. So it's not just kids, staring at a screen and not actually having engagement, really meaningful engagement. So that was a really good component, I think, of all the sessions that we've done. We did another one on just setting them up for applying for jobs and building their resume and how to interview in the era of COVID-19. So, all their interviews are going to be on this platform. And so we actually went through, like, here's what you need to think about for the best Zoom interview, right? And so we did a whole session on getting ready to apply and interview for your first job. And that's when we had Joel Wren from Klein ISD, who's our fine arts director, join us, and he went over a bunch of things that he would ask in the interviews. And so that was really, I thought they were totally all over that one, because we did it maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, right when the whole application process was getting started. And so I think that it was very relevant to them at the time, and it went a really long way.
Yeah. And I mean, it was everything from these kind of big picture, what sort of answer does a administrator respond to, all the way down to make sure you wear pants, which is, I mean, we all laugh, but we've all seen those videos of people who forget that, I don't have, I think there was a guy in like Good Morning America or one of those shows, he was a reporter who had the whole get up, and then they pan down and you can see like he's literally wearing boxer briefs or something, like very embarrassing on national television. So avoiding that at all costs was definitely something we wanted them to walk away with.
We just really wanted to equip them with really valuable information as they, start to embark on their journey as a music educator.
And they need the help at this point. It's as much little guidance they can get right now.
Right. I mean, that's the thing too. We acknowledge in those first couple of sessions, I tried to anyway, acknowledge the anxiety and the uncertainty that they all must have been feeling. And, there's purpose from us to reassure them, that, we're going to give you as much information as we can. We're going to try to steer you through this and hopefully inspire you in new ways and help you become more visionary in how you want to go in to not just your interviews, but into the profession itself and how you want to, move forward in the next few years. And I think that was just a time, especially then, still a little bit now, but I think more people have kind of, come around in their headspace of kind of accepting where we are. But at that point in time, I think there was a whole lot of uncertainty and anxiety that was really important to address, and just kind of calm them down a little bit. Hey, here's something for you specifically. We haven't forgotten about you, right?
I know you've got the videos up.
They're up. All except for the first one, I think, yeah.
Okay. So they're all there if anybody wants to check those out, to see those. But is this something that you can see as a useful tool down the road that we can use further on in using these? It's professional development, being student teachers or being how you advertise it through your stuff, Cory.
I mean, so the virtual music conference website was actually kind of an extension of the thing that Joni and I were doing, in the sense that I was seeing these students that looked harried. They were like, it felt like they were jumping from one Zoom to another, and they were, you could tell that they had other places to go. They would call bail out early, kind of like you do at TMEA, where you like have 2 sessions at the same time and you go to half of one, half the other. And I was like, I wonder where they're getting their information, because I will come across a few things here and there. And I said, well, I can't really find a central dumping ground for this kind of what amounts to a conference that's ongoing, it's organic, it's ad hoc, and it's this kind of shambling circus that rolls down the highway. And what I wanted to do was give a little bit of a backbone to it, so that you could tell, what all is going on kind of broadly. And that's where that idea came from. And then I approached Joni and said, could I put these videos up on the website as a resource? And so we started kind of filling in a back catalog of your material, Chad, and then our stuff. And then we have a couple other video series from different areas. Like Pywer has a giant, they call it night school, but it's turned into homeschool now for anybody that wants to do the drill design thing. They've got a lot of great resources that we've put on the site. And so all of that is there mainly to serve as a program book for this shambling circus down the highway, but also as a resource for things that are not just, hey, look at this handout, or hey, look at this Google Classroom lesson. I wanted to kind of provide things that would not just be, take and do, but things to think about and things to kind of cogitate over, to maybe springboard you into another idea or springboard you into a new way of doing. Because I do see this as not the future. Of course, certainly not. Like, we need face-to-face instruction as part of what we do in the arts. Right. But I think as a useful tool, this has kind of shown itself to be useful in more ways than we thought it would, honestly. And I was telling my wife when this first started, it's like, there's a lot, we would never want to have a pandemic, but that it happened now versus even 5 years ago, the stuff we're able to do in terms of communication and collaboration is so much better now than it was 5-10 years ago, that we at least can have a kind of this simulacra of normalcy and actual like progress. And in our case, professional development, because what do band directors do when we have free time? We find another project to do. And so that's kind of where this came in. And I think for like student teachers especially, we'll be using this more often, not to replace anything, but to augment the experiences we already have planned. So if we want to, have Joni talk to our student teachers, it won't be that Joni has to drive down from the Woodlands to downtown Houston, where our campus is, because that is, tantamount to madness most days. From the Woodlands to downtown Houston is maybe 30 miles as the crow flies, and could take you anywhere from an hour to 3, depending on the day. So, but we know the efficacy of this, and we know that it's something that scales well. Even if we can't do it in the classroom, we can schedule a time that will replace one of our sessions, because we're going to have a Zoom session with this person, because that's the best way to do it, and everyone's on their laptops. I think it's a valuable tool that has shown itself to be useful, but it's by no means going to replace the things that we do and things we value.
Yeah,
I absolutely agree with that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying the same thing. Like, it is an extension of what we do, and in a lot of cases, when you're not in the classroom, like for students, when you're not there to review what has covered, in some cases, it's whatever that virtual learning session is, you can go back on your own schedule. Right now it's like,
well, and it's not even that this technology didn't exist before all this. It's just now, oh, hey, there's all this stuff out there that we can really learn about and utilize now. All this stuff that's available to us that, a lot of us didn't necessarily have any experience with or weren't even aware of. And so it's forced us all in all parts of our lives to kind of reimagine how we do things. And, so like these student teacher sessions, I'd be all about doing these again. And using this format if we needed to. So, and I remember feeling that the first couple of times we did, I was like, why don't we always do this? Why isn't this something that we always do? So there are silver linings to all this. I mean, we certainly don't want to go through anything like this again, but there's silver linings if you look for them. And, this has been a way to really connect with that younger generation and try to give back a little bit from what we've learned. And I see all sorts of things going on all the time, different sessions people are offering, and it's on an unprecedented level in our profession. Like, that's never happened at this level before. So it's really neat to see that going on and everybody kind of making the best of it. And that's what band directors do. I mean, we problem solve, and we we come in contact with whatever the issue is, because there's always fires to put out. Well, this is a different kind of fire, and now we put on our fireman's hat and figure out how to make the best of it. Even though it's not a perfect scenario, we can make it meaningful and worthwhile.
And I mean, as band directors, how many of us really ever face perfect scenarios? Like, that's
exactly. It never goes according to plan. No. So this is like this is just another day in the life.
Right. Like, what's the phrase about there's no battle plan that survives first contact with the enemy, and there's no lesson plan that survives first contact with your band. So, we're really adept at this, and I think it's showing in what we do, because I'll tell you, part of it's my network, but most of the sessions I come across are band people or band related. There's some for elementary and there's some for vocal, but they seem to be less common. And if they're out there, I would love to know about them, because I think those are great for everyone to be able to go to. but we seem as a people, if you want to call us that way, our tribe tends to be the kind that's like, what can we do to help, and how can we make it run like clockwork? And I think we've done both of those things as a profession to an incredibly high level.
And before this, before we got shut down and were forced into online virtual work, how much stuff and this is for both of you to answer, how much online stuff have you done with your band programs or your college classes or anything on that line from your professional side, either from teaching or from communicating with other professionals?
Well, I mean, I guess I'll go first on that. You know, we would use technology in a limited capacity with our band students before all this happened, and fortunately, when everything started to happen back in the middle of March, we were able to default to those things to kind of bridge the gap of, okay, we're not going back to school. What are we going to do now until we figure all this out? And so we were able to utilize some of those things, you know, like smart music and charms, and we'd already been utilizing those in some capacities, and so we just kind of expanded what we've been doing there. But we've actually kind of leaned away from those things now, and you know, is trying to come up with more ideas and whatnot. And you know, that gets difficult trying to keep it interesting. I mean, this is frustrating. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's frustrating trying to do band like this, and you know, you don't know if everybody's engaged and they're not able to do music like they're used to doing music. So finding different ways to do that has been challenging, but also enriching too, because it makes us think outside the box and get outside of our comfort zone, which is always a good thing. From a professional standpoint, I've never done this much collaborating from an electronic digital standpoint ever. This is the most, I mean, I've had some experience with Zoom and webinars and, you know, Google Meet and stuff like that, but at this level and this frequency, absolutely not. So at least we're getting better at that, right?
Oh, for sure. And anything, anything you're doing now that's, like you said, you moved away from smart music and charms? Anything with your program you're doing, Joni, that's...
Well, we're not doing anything earth-shattering. I mean, we're about to start doing some a cappella assignments for their final project, if you will. I know a lot of groups have ended up putting together some of their UIL program. We worked on our UIL music for a few weeks after the break, but decided to move away from it and pursue some other things. So we're teaching them how to use the a cappella app now. We're going to have them do some like 4-part Bach chorale assignments with themselves and with other people. Got that idea from Jarrett Littman, who's incredibly, you know, inventive and smart and creative. And so we're going to start doing that. We've used the Zoom platform to the share options and have them, you know, submit recordings of their solos that they've been working on. And we'll do a listening session on some of our Zoom sectionals where we'll listen to a portion of everyone's solo and they get to critique each other in the chat session. So they like to use the little chat. So that gives them an opportunity to, you know, get involved and contribute. And it's been really good to challenge them to use their ears and listen to other people's music that's not their own, that they're not familiar with, and use the knowledge that we've been teaching them for years and years and years. Okay, I want you to articulate what you're hearing. Don't just say it's good, you know. I want you, why is it good? Tell me why it was good. Tell me what they can do better. Explain what you mean by, you know, XYZ. And so we've used it as a great way to listen by using the share component on Zoom. You know, some other things, also just being silly with them, letting them have creative days where, you know, they get to come in, and we did music charades one day where they had to prepare one of their favorite songs or something, and they only play the first few notes of it, and we have to try to guess like what it is. So it's another listening component. So you have to be silly a little bit and try to do some things that aren't as academic, I guess, just to keep them having fun, if you will, because it's a different scenario now. But nothing earth-shattering. There's people out there doing stuff that's way more interesting than what we're doing, but we're at least, you know, keeping them showing up twice a week and doing things that are interesting and together, and keeping the face-to-face time, and keeping them playing their instruments, which is the most important thing, is the connection and playing their horns. So we're doing the best we can. We're about to get started on marching music, and I think that'll perk a lot of them up, you know, because lots of kids looked forward to marching music. Well,
Mhm.
enter a new age of doing that on the computer and see how that goes. So lots to discover still.
That's
Mhm.
cool. That's cool. And what about you, Cory, in terms of online stuff before we got into this age?
I've done a little bit, like when I was at Kennesaw State before I came to Houston. I actually had John Benzer Skype in to talk with my students about setting up students on instruments at the beginner level and things like that. So I've done a little bit of that, but never like Joni, never to this quantity. And it's instructive because this is a different sort of tired that you get from doing Zooms than you do in the classroom, and we don't have enough like data yet to know whether or not that's just we're kind of moving towards that being like our teaching tired, because the first year of teaching you go home and fall asleep on the couch and wake up at 9 o'clock the next morning and have missed the first two periods. But the technological side of things that we're doing right now is kind of across the expanse at the university. I have colleagues that are doing completely synchronous, exactly the same time as their class would have been, and doing lectures and they pretty much just kind of moved the venue from a classroom at the University of Houston to Zoom and did it in a matter of days, which is fantastic. Especially some of my colleagues are fully tenured professors, and what they don't know about technology could fill more books than their dissertation ever would. So that they made that transition so quickly is admirable. What I'm doing is actually a little different because I work with our student teachers and I work with undergraduates in teaching methods classes. I've converted my methods classes to be completely asynchronous. So I sit down on Sundays and I record 2 or 3 lectures for the week. And they're set up very much like Khan Academy, where there's like a whiteboard and I'm talking and drawing and showing examples of things. And then they have to do a response prompt by the end of the week talking about different things that we talk about at a higher level of recall than just regurgitating. They have to kind of synthesize things or say, well, how does this that we talked about this week work with this thing we talked about last week, and how would that show up in your teaching? And that's, I think, proven effective for some students, but it definitely does not replace what we could do in the classroom of, in my case, showing them where fourth position is on the trombone. It's a lot easier to do sitting right next to them with a tuner than it is to go, well, fourth position is just beyond. That's just, it's dancing about architecture at that point, and it's less effective but more effective than I hoped it would be. So we're salvageable, but it's not something that I would ever want to go, yes, this is the way we need to teach things moving forward. It's like, I think William Gibson said, the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. And that's one thing we're seeing, is that the technological future is here, but the learning outcomes are not evenly distributed among our students or among our teachers who are able to deliver the information. And I don't think it's ever going to get to a point where we're going to replace face-to-face instruction for some things, but other things we're finding do have legs in this virtual space that we never thought would. So like Joni said, there are silver linings to it.
Well, and I think too, it's interesting and worth noting that I think this time has really allowed many teachers to focus on some things that kind of fall by the wayside, during the regular school year. So much of what we do is ensemble driven, and there's usually some kind of competitive goal. And, so you've got tunnel vision a lot of the times, from day to day in the classroom of working towards the test, if you will. This time has really allowed to slow down and say, okay, let's take a look at how good our counting skills really are. Let's take a look at how well we're listening and matching interval, and do we know what that interval is? And can we sing that interval? Can we, just looking at the parts of like the theory of what we do, and asking ourselves, is this an opportunity in this different setting where we're forced to do something more on an individual basis to address those things, so that we're not wasting time, because we can't do a lot of ensemble in this setting. You can if you do the recordings and the outside work and the piece it all together, and there's merit to that. And I love everything that I've seen out there. I wish I was smart enough to do all that stuff. But there's a lot that we can do, live and together to assess where our students are and kind of find where some of those cracks are in their learning deficiencies. So it's a good time for that too. It's against one of those silver linings that you have to look for,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that exist, and you just have to be willing to look for them and identify them, and then see how you can work with those things.
And clearly, by you guys doing all this stuff that you've thrown out and shared with everybody is making a difference in more people. I mean, obviously, that's what you guys do, is make a difference, because it's hard to find resources where people are sharing amongst each other, and you can gather from that. And I think that's why I was so interested in. I mean, that's kind of what I've done with my channel too. It's not so much. I mean, you can find all the information, but it's interesting what nuggets you find from people and talking through what they do in their layout. Just listen to you, Joni, what you do. It's like there's stuff in there that people hadn't thought about. Maybe they haven't done that part, or haven't done that little element that someone takes away. And I just think it's so different when we put them in these perspectives of a collaborative conversation. And you can sit on them every night. I know you advertise those. There's a couple others, but I'm amazed how much we can gather from that. And people sitting all over. You guys are in the Houston area, and I'm 6-7 hours away, and we can figure out how to make this thing better for everyone. Share it with everybody. I think that's the bigger thing why I was attracted to contact you and kind of reach out and say, hey, let's sit down and talk, because you all are sharing stuff, and that's the step that I think it takes an extra. I mean, it takes a toll to take that extra step and do my job, and then now let me figure out how to help people.
Yeah, I mean, we're all kind of needing to lean on each other right now. I mean, our jobs are big enough, you know, without having to come up with new and creative, inventive ways of teaching kids. And so I know for me personally, there's been weeks where I have a lot of brain capacity and bandwidth to really think about it and get creative and come up with some ideas. And like weeks like this week and last week, I've really needed to go to people and say, hey, what are you doing? You know, because with this approach to things, you can't do the same thing every day. You can't do the same thing every week like we're used to doing. And when I say same, I mean routine, right? In the band world, things are different every day from a progress standpoint and from an artistry standpoint, and you know, going from this point to the next. But in this kind of situation, you know, we have to come up with more ideas and a little bit more variety, and because you know, you're looking at a kid through a screen, and so the more we can help each other, the better. Because I know for me, there's been days where I'm just like, okay, what's next? Because you know, you get to a point where you just need that. You need constructive ideas, and you need help and support from other people. And so I'm seeking that from others. I hope I've been able to help others along the way. But yeah, it's a big collaborative process right now, I think, to help us get through it.
Yeah, and I think things like what we're offering and what several other people are offering, like I know John Liner has his virtual band director conference, and there's several others, the Consumer Institute's coming up, things like this. You know, in the band world, and this is like kind of me talking as someone who hasn't stepped away from being a band director. I still identify as that, but I'm looking at it through the lens of a researcher too. We're a very pragmatic bunch of people. We want to do things that we know work because our time is valuable with our students. We have so precious little of it, and we don't want to waste our students' time or the forward progress we could have had on an idea that doesn't really have, you know, it sounds really good on paper, but it doesn't really show up for real in the product or in our students' experience. And so where things like what we're doing and what these other folks are doing really kind of come in handy and come in clutch is that you can put context to the frame of what somebody gives you. So like Joni talks about, we're doing these Bach chorale things, and I got that from Jarrett Lippman. And all of a sudden you can see this provenance, almost like, you know, it goes through this to this, and I know it works because these two people have really good programs, and I can rest assured that I'm going to be able to use this thing, and it's going to have benefit because it's worked for other people too. And so that's where we kind of move beyond just like go reading a book or even just looking at a handout or some static resource on a website. These are all really good things and really good resources. These add a layer of social verification, but also collaboration of seeing other people talk about the thing and reading their body language as they talk about it. It's like, well, yeah, that was a really good idea, but with the wrong body language, you're going to know it was a good idea that maybe I shouldn't have done, or, you know, those sorts of things. So I think that's one of the benefits of this platform in what we're talking about here of this sharing of ideas is that it adds a layer that doesn't exist if it's just a blog post or even a Facebook video, that there's this back and forth, which is, I think, really valuable and something that we're all missing as teachers, but also as musicians.
And it's like a conference. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just many conferences, and we can, the bigger the Zoom, the bigger the party.
It's professional development, you know, I've had, you know, we did all these student teacher Zooms, and I've had a handful of them that I know through other experiences, you know, ask me to be references and, you know, fill out, you know, their the things that we get from their district, asking about them. And every time there's the question of, you know, this person actively seeks out professional development to further their, you know, progress and success. I can say yes. It's like, yes, because they've been coming to these things. And so that's pretty cool to know that we've been able to be a part of that and the professional development for college students. Whereas, you know, I could seek professional development from other webinars and whatnot that are going on out there. So it really does kind of cover the whole gamut for everybody, which is really cool.
Is there other stuff that you guys have kind of dealt with in this, or that you want to share that we can put on this when we put this up? In terms of resources or tools that you guys have used that you found helpful for people that are dealing with the remote, and how else ways to deal with the remote teaching?
I mean, to me, generally, just looking in the right places and looking for voices that you trust and asking them, you know, where should I look? Like, that's part of what the website I'm working on continuously is all about, is sourcing. It's curating a list of things that I know aren't just somebody out to make a quick buck, aren't, you know, questionable in terms of the content. You know, is somebody could come on there and talk about flat Earth or something like that? It's like, probably not. I'm not going to put this up there. So, you know, that aspect of things, like, just keep looking for resources that are out there and send them my way at the Virtual Music Conferences website, so I can put them up. So, because that's a totally free, like, I'm paying for that out of my own pocket. So, like, that is entirely set up to be a resource for anybody who wants it. And my preference is always going to be to steer them towards stuff that's low or no cost, because I know we're all economically and financially at least apprehensive right now. If you're a student teacher, you are abjectly poor, as we all remember from our days of ramen long ago. So that, I think, is a big part of it. But the other part is, don't just use Zoom or Google Meet or whatever you're using, the new Facebook platform they just rolled out a couple of days ago. Don't use that just for the professional development stuff. Have a happy hour with your friends. Play, you know, if you're a board game person or a card game person, like, play Exploding Kittens or Cards Against Humanity with your buddies over this thing, because that's part of what we're missing. Is we're social creatures. That's just the way we're all built. Yeah. Some less social than others. Like, I could live in my house for a month at a time and be okay, but that's not everybody's cup of tea. And so using the technology for more than just professional development, take some of the stigma out of, like, oh, I got to go on the computer and do this thing. It's going to be a 6 Zoom day. There's other flavors that you get to pull into your life through this, you know, this little glossy black mirror that's in front of us. And I think that's valuable. And I think that's maybe underrated from kind of the talking heads in our profession. Not that they're wrong in saying this is great for, you know, professional development, things like that. I think it's a wonderful vehicle, but also making sure that we're taking care of us holistically is something that needs to be mentioned and needs to be kind of reinforced, especially to band directors. Again, speaking as a researcher, we tend to be the ones that are going to put in the 15, 16, 17-hour days, because that's what needs to get done to achieve our personal goals, but also to help our students. And so, you know, I'm not going to say treat yourself and just kind of go off and do your thing, but at the same time, you do need to develop balance. And this has forced us in a lot of ways to reconcile those things. And so I'd say embrace that to the extent that you can.
Yeah, at some point we just have to stop at the day we don't go home, because we are home.
I think that we're gaining a lot of perspective in a lot of different areas through this, that, again, you know, we don't want to have to experience something like a pandemic to figure that stuff out ever again in the future. But if we're going to if we're going to make the best of this whole situation, I think perspective is such an important thing. Just realizing what can be done with the time that we're given. And, when we do return to whatever our new normal is, we can look back on this and draw from it. These are the things that maybe we should be doing all along, in a little bit more limited capacity, and infuse that, with what we know, to be what we use, on a yearly, daily, weekly basis. But yeah, I think that there's a lot to gain from this whole experience. I don't want it to ever happen again, but I think it's better to look at it as positively as you can and figure out how to manage it. And that's, that's what I've been saying to my kids the whole time is, it's easy to get real down about this, and, we're all going to have our bad days, but there's a lot of positive here. Look for the things that you're allowed to do now, or you have time to do now that maybe you didn't have time for before. Look at the relationships that you're cultivating now that maybe you were neglecting before. And then same with our teaching profession is, how we're having to balance differently now, but in a lot of ways more positively. So it's interesting. I think we're going to learn a lot from the whole situation.
And you both are creating good samples of that and good locations for people to look for that and find help. It's so valuable and important.
Well, and I'll plug Cory's website. It's awesome. I can't take any credit for it. I would just have, some of our sessions are on there, but if you're looking for something that's going to put a whole lot of resources in one place, you don't have to go all over trying to scour, what's going on, then check it out, because it's really great and it's up to date, and you're bound to find at least one thing, that you're going to be interested in and want to be involved in. So kudos to you, Cory. It's really awesome.
Thank you for saying that, Joni.
virtualmusicconference.org. And there's a way to join that. Is that correct, Cory? If you want to get
you can sign up for the newsletter. I send out the newsletter every Sunday night with all the stuff that's kind of out at that point. And that's on the website. It's also on a Facebook post. And yeah, it's pretty easy to come across. In addition, when we host our next get-together or virtual get-together, Joni and I will put out a note through that mailing list for anybody that's interested in signing up for an invite, because that's we don't just publish that stuff openly. We want it to be curated in terms of, we want student teachers to get first priority of being the people in the audience that get that time with the people that we're talking to.
And you can buy Cory a cup of coffee on there to help support his cause.
Yes, you can buy me a cup of coffee. It is a metaphor, but it is a cute metaphor that I thought was better.
You should put your Venmo on there.
It's hooked up.
Donations welcome.
Mm-hmm. That's entirely what it is. I have Stripe and Venmo, so I'm covered every which way.
Tips appreciated.
Yes.
I want to thank you both for sitting down and just talking about how we're trying, and I think all of us are trying to make things better and make the most of this situation, the time we're in, and it doesn't matter. You just, like, we're all music teachers and band directors, and, okay, well, the bus turned the wrong way. Well, we got to figure out how to get there still, no matter what. And so you guys are fantastic people and wonderful to sit and talk to. So thank you for joining me on this, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you for doing this. Your channel has been something that has been super consistent and super helpful as we've moved through this whole pandemic situation, of giving everybody little bite-sized things to take away and kind of see how other people are dealing with things. So thank you for doing what you've been doing.
And you can find all those videos at the Hey Band Network YouTube channel, and you can subscribe and like to this video and see others. Thank you for joining us all on the Hey Band Network.